Hello everyone and welcome. Today I'm going to take a look at all the differences between the games part of this story and how the anime handled this story. And it will be a little bit different for this one. Now for season 1 it was rather easy to go through every single episode and just have the main story from the game put right next to this. But this one is a bit weird. We're going to have to get a bit into the nitty gritty with this one because we're going to have to start out not with a main story chapter like a regular chapter, but we're going to have to start out comparing to the prologue. So in the game you have the prologue, which is the very beginning of the game. If you boot up the game, you have a new account, you press the play button and it immediately throws you into the prologue, which is this small little scene that a lot of the stuff that we saw in this episode is based off of. And the prologue, it starts with Homura, Madoka, and Mami. They're all fighting Patricia in her labyrinth. We already see the difference is that we have Mami here instead of Sayaka. And as we know from the original anime, where we also had a similar scene of these three fighting Patricia together, Mami creates a bridge out of ribbons, Homura stops time, blah blah blah. However, the difference now is that in Stop Time, Ui appears in front of Homura and tells her to come to Kamihama, and you know, the whole save all magical girls stuff. Now, outside of the labyrinth, after they've beaten the witch, we'll first off take a quick note of the background. This background will be a surprise tool that will help us later. And outside of the labyrinth, we then see that Homura is noticing Ui again, who's there again, that has another vision, and they all celebrate their victory. And that's basically how the prologue ends. It's a very short section. There's a bunch of gameplay that happens here as well, like battles and stuff, to sort of like tell you how the game is going to be played. But of course, we're not going to worry about that. That's at least the story part of everything, and you can already see how that is already quite close to what we saw in the episode with some differences. But, and here's the interesting part, here's where it gets interesting. I'm gonna go now and skip all the way outside of main story. We're gonna leave main story for now. We're gonna go to a section of the story called Another Story. Now, Another Story is a different kind of like story content alongside main story, where instead of just having the regular story with Iroha and her friends and the Magias and all that's going on, instead we're looking basically a similar story through the eyes of the Puella Holy Quintet. So basically, while all that weird stuff is happening in Kamihama, while the main story is happening, in the meantime, we're going to take a look at what the PMHQ does. And a lot of these chapters have not a whole lot happening, right? A lot of these chapters are just Mami saying like, oh man, something weird is going on in Kamihama, I should go over there. And then she goes over there and finds some weird stuff going on. And then she goes back and goes like, Kamihama's haunted, cocks gun, and goes back like, what? No, Kamihama's haunted, and goes back and kills some more witches or whatever. And then Sayaka and Kyoko and the rest are also like, oh man, something weird is going on in Kamihama. Maybe we should go there. And that keeps going on for like hours of gameplay of story content. Not that many people actually like Another Story. Even the people that really, really like the main story, even a lot of those don't really like Another Story because it just feels like filler. It's basically filler. However, the reason I need to talk about that is because a whole bunch of stuff that we see in Another Story, specifically in Another Story chapter 6 and 7, actually was in this episode to some degree, but it was heavily remixed, or we saw that stuff was chronologically like thrown around or completely cut out, shifted around. Like, this has been a lot of doctoring, a lot of Frankensteining to get all of these parts together. But enough to head into Another Story chapter 6, where we see something completely different happen. So I really need to mention that prologue happens before main story, while this anime episode happens during main story, so you already have a chronological difference. But now this Another Story chapter 6 also happens during main story, so long after the prologue, long after what we just saw in the prologue. We have Another Story chapter 6, where Madoka and Homura, they've just come back from Kamihama. So in the main story, in chapter 5, the one where they meet Sana, Madoka and Homura were part of that chapter. They were in Kamihama at that point in the game story, and they didn't really do anything. They just said hi to the camera and then stood there for an hour, so they didn't really do anything. But they were there. They saw Sana get rescued. They fought Alina once even. But after all of that, they come back and they talk to Sayaka, who's still in Mitakehara and doesn't know anything that happened. And they tell her that, hey, Mami has gone missing. Mami is somewhere in Kamihama. We tried to find her, we couldn't find her. Sad face. They also tell Sayaka about Uwasa, that they figured out about the doppels. So they already know about a whole bunch of stuff that is going on in Kamihama. They tell Sayaka all about that. And then Sayaka wants, of course, to go to Kamihama together with Madoka and Homura. And they do. They go over there and they don't really know what to do. But then they remember, oh, wait a second. We saw this Alina character. And this Alina character might have an idea where Mami is, because she mentioned Mami by name at some point or something like that. And they go, oh, well, we should probably take a look at who this Alina character is. And they also seem to remember that she's an artist. And so what they do is they have this idea that maybe we should look up the art of Alina in some library where they couldn't find anything out, and then they decide to go to the Memory Museum. Which is weird, because if they just asked a single person out on the street where they would find any artwork, they would probably get thrown over to the museum, which I think it's the Minagi Museum. It's like a really big one where Mai works or whatever, and even if they just asked by name as well, like, do you know where you can find Alina's artwork, they would probably also get put to the same museum. There's like this one big museum that had all the artwork, like this art museum. I don't know why they didn't go to that, but they just, I guess, didn't ask even a single person about it. So instead they go to the Memory Museum, which I was abandoned. It's like there's no person is there anymore. I'm not quite sure how they even found out about it. Anyway, all of that aside, like this is not I know I'm talking a lot about plot holes sometimes, but let's ignore the plot holes. They go to the Memory Museum, and there they run into some wings of Magus, they run into some feathers, and they start fighting them for a little bit. So Madoka and Homura, they're now fighting some feathers, while Sayaka rushes through, and she finds Mami, Holy Mami currently, fighting Iroha. As that happened, something similar that we saw, of course, in the last episode of the anime, where Sayaka comes in to save the day. And Sayaka then interrupts that fight, and yeah, basically the same thing happened, or like the similar thing happened to what we saw in the anime, so not too much new stuff there. After that, when the Memory Museum like crumbles to dust or whatever, they all run out of the museum, where we have Sayaka meeting up with Madoka and Homura again, and Sayaka just tells everyone what happened, like, oh no, Holy Mami, bad stuff. And also Sayaka found out about the truth behind, becoming witches or whatever, so she talks to them about that as well. I go, no, we're becoming witches. They're all really sad, but then they all decide that maybe we should have hope. So yeah, the message of hope is continuing. After that, also Sayaka finds Kyoko somehow and tells her about everything that happened, about Mami, about witches and all that kind of stuff. And Kyoko doesn't really care and just wants to keep being alone and doing her own stuff, which is just Kyoko being Kyoko, and that's how Another Story Chapter 6 ends. So we already see that there's some stuff going on here that in the last episode we saw, like, okay, Sayaka and the Memory Museum, right? But Madoka and Homura were also there in the game, and they already knew about everything, but they weren't even present at all in the anime. They were still back in Kamihama, being completely oblivious, in Matekahara, completely oblivious to everything. And now we get into Another Story Chapter 7, which is going to also have a bunch more parallels to what we saw in this episode. So in Another Story Chapter 7, Madoka, Homura, and Sayaka, they're back in Mitakihara. They're sad because of everything that happened. Madoka tries to talk to Kyubei for a little bit, but nothing comes of it. Then Madoka comes across a witch that she recognizes from Kamihama. So for some reason, a Kamihama witch is now in Mitakihara. And if you're wondering, does this plot thread ever go anywhere? No, it never gets explained why there's suddenly witches from Kamihama in Mitakihara, but that happens. She fights that witch for a little bit, and then Homura and Sayaka, they come in, they help a little bit. Then we get not a flashback, but we get sort of meanwhile at the Legion of Doom section, where we see Kyoko still in Kamihama, who is joined up with the Wings of Magius. Now don't worry, she's doing that to spy on them, okay? Now this is something that might still happen in the anime, but I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this, because there's a good chance that none of the stuff, like with Kyoko's plot thread right here, appears in the anime, or at least not by much. So I'm going to quickly talk about it when it comes up again. So after this little meanwhile section, we then head back to where we were in Mitakihara, and Homura, Madoka, Sayaka, blah blah, they all team back up again. They fight some more witches. There's a whole bunch of witch fighting in these and other stories. It goes on for so long. But let's skip all of the witch fighting, and the three of them meet up again. They decide that they need to keep Mitakihara safe while Mami is not there, and I guess while Kyoko is also not there, even though Kyoko is still in like another town, like in Casamino. But yeah, they decide they need to keep Mitakihara safe, and that's going to be their job from now on. Now they fight some more witches, because of course they do, and in this next fight that they're having, Sayaka overextends a little bit. She gets hurt. Homura has to stop time to save Sayaka. Wink, wink. Keep that in mind for now. Homura has to stop time to save her, and then all three of them have to disengage the witch and run away. Wink, wink. Keep that in mind. Outside of that labyrinth, Sayaka then gets angry over their situation. Wink, wink. Keep that in mind for later. And Madoka is then the one who calms her down by saying, like, just by saying some nice stuff, wink, wink, keep that in mind, you're kind of seeing where all the parallels are already, if you watch the episode, which you should have until now. Then, and this is where it's interesting, because here's where we diverge again. They get spied on by some feathers who are for some reason in Mitakihara, and Madoka then gets a phone text from Iroha, because also remember that in the game, Iroha never fell down a hole. She's still fine, and with Yachio sort of looking around the city right now, and of course in the anime, Yachio is alone, which makes Yachio a lot more angry. So Madoka gets a text from Iroha telling her that Mami is probably an uwasa now. She's probably a rumor now, and everyone's really sad about that. But Iroha then also says, maybe you can break her out of it by getting through to her heart, which is just speech for use the power of friendship or whatever to get Mami out of it. Now, will that actually happen in the anime? If that happens in the anime, then it will be something new, because that doesn't actually happen in the game. This is a plot thread that doesn't actually get revealed, that doesn't actually get followed through on. But I'm going to mention it anyway, because I assume the anime is going to handle this very differently. I assume the anime is going to do something completely different with here. Or maybe not. Maybe not. We'll see. Then, and this is also where it gets weird, Holy Mami just randomly appears out of nowhere. She's just there suddenly. I think the idea is, or rather the way it is hinted at, is that they were being spied on by the feathers, because I guess Holy Mami sent them to figure out where the three are, and then when they found them, they would like phone back to Holy Mami and be like, hey, we found them, and then Holy Mami would come over and do something, and we'll see what she does. But also, Alina is also there. So Alina and Holy Mami, they're both there, and they just lock the three of them up in a labyrinth. Now keep in mind that Alina can like create pocket dimensions, and Holy Mami has some ribbons or whatever, so they just saying like pocket dimension plus labyrinth plus ribbons means perfect lock to put anyone in. Not quite sure exactly how that works, but like I said, don't worry about that, about the actual logistics of this, because, you know, this doesn't actually happen in the anime, so you don't need to worry about it. At least I probably don't think this is actually going to happen, because the main reason why this happened in the game is because while the main story happened, in the main story, Iroha, of course, has the phone number of Madoka, I think maybe of Homura as well, maybe even of Sayaka now, I don't know, but because now they all know each other, they needed an excuse why they couldn't just come back to Kamihama and help out Iroha and the gang sooner, like they do that later, but why they couldn't do that sooner, or why they couldn't be reached immediately. So they just throw their hands up and say, they're in a barrier now, they're labyrinth, they're locked away, okay? So that's basically just the excuse, which in the anime, we don't need that. We don't need that, because we're shoving all of that story way later anyway, so we don't need to worry about, in the anime, why doesn't Yachio just call Madoka, because how could she, right? They're not even part of the story yet. So this is probably the main reason why we're not going to see this in the anime. So after they've been knocked out, we then get another Meanwhile of the Legion of Doom segment where Kyoko is getting invited to enter the Magia's headquarters. Now, there's going to be a little bit of other stuff happens with Kyoko after this. Like the another story, chapter 7 ends here, but in chapter 8 or whatever, we see Kyoko at the... I'm just going to quickly talk about this for like half a second. She's like in the Magia's HQ, then she figures out, it's like overhears from someone that apparently Madoka, Homura, and Sayaka are trapped somewhere in Mitakihara. Then she goes over to Mitakihara and busts them out. And then all of them come back to Kamihama to help Mami. That's basically all that happens. So we're still getting to basically the same place that we're going to be at the end of the anime, like the current episode rather, where Madoka, Homura, and Sayaka, they were sad for a little bit, but now they're back and happy again, and they're like, let's help Mami and go to Kamihama, yay. So it's basically the same situation, with a lot less back and forth and a lot less stuff happening all over the place, just a lot more straightforward setup for that. And Kyoko is like not really part of that story just yet, but I assume in the anime she's gonna come back at some point. Maybe they will actually like have her be in the Magia's headquarters at some point in the anime, and then stuff happens. I don't know. We're gonna have to see. But now that we've talked about the game story that much, let's take a look back at the episode and take a look what happened in the episode, because now that we have all this knowledge from basically the way stuff happened in the game, which, just a quick recap, first you have the prologue with them fighting Patricia, with Mami there, then way later during main story, Madoka and Homura, they saw what happened in Kamihama, they talk to Sayaka about that, they go back to Kamihama, they see shit go down, they go back to Mitakihara, they're sad, then they're happy again, then they get locked up, then they get busted out, and now they're going back to Kamihama. Now in the anime, here's what happens. So first off, the episode plays, like I said, in the middle of main story, way later, and I can quickly say that the main reasons why we know exactly when this plays is because in the prologue, of course, of the game, Mami is there, and Homura is first being talked to about Kamehama, which of course also doesn't happen. Also happens in this episode, but of course in this episode, Sayaka, like in the anime, Sayaka talks about Mami being in Kamehama, about Mami being different, about something bad happened to Mami. So we know that it plays after this, when we know the prologue plays way before the story because none of the characters know about Kamehama yet. So the episode begins with Homura and Madoka. They're fighting Patricia, but they get beaten up. And at some point, Homura stops time trying to help Madoka. However, then she sees Ui telling her about coming to Kamehama, like a broken record. Then they have to flee the battle, the three of them, and they get saved by Sayaka. And now, if you still remember the background from way earlier, here's the background again. They used the same background for outside of Patricia's barrier. I think they might have used this one in the original anime as well. I'm not going to go back now and check because I've already checked way too much stuff trying to prepare for this video. So after they're outside again, similar stuff happens, as I said earlier in Another Story Chapter 7. So after they fled the barrier, things get a bit heated up. Sayaka gets a little bit angry. However, at this point, she tells them about Mami, also about the fate of becoming witches, and they're all sad again for a little bit. Kyubei shows up and talks to them about entropy. However, then Sayaka gets even more angry until Madoka says some important words to make Sayaka back off, and everyone is at least fine for the moment, but willing to have hope, I guess. Well, we're gonna see right after this that there's this short scene in the classroom with Miss Kazuko, which of course is anime original. None of this ever happened in the game. At least I don't think it ever happened. And we then cut to Homura, who has noticed some people that are witch-kissed, and she protects them, which is also interesting because in the game, Homura is basically, for the most part, Homura is just there to help out and protect Madoka, as you would expect. But now we actually get her to, we actually see her do some stuff, which is good. I like Homura actually doing stuff. And after that, Madoka also recognizes that there's going to be a witch nearby, and she like telecalls, like she uses telepathy to call Sayaka, I guess. They have home phones as well, but telepathy, I guess, is better. And Sayaka is still very sad, and then Madoka also, there's something that's also kind of happened in the game story where some of the words that Madoka used to calm down the situations whenever things got tense, or even just when we got a look into Madoka's brain, whenever she like spoke to the camera, basically, she basically talked about how scared she is, but how she knows that everyone else is scared as well. And then she also tells the other ones like, hey, we're all scared together, like, right, we're all in the same boat. There's some of the stuff that she says in the game, and she says it here as well in the anime, more parallels to the anime, to the game, or at least some parts of the game here in the anime. And then everyone, well, at least for now, just Madoka and Homura, they team up again, they fight Patricia, they get beaten up. Then Sayaka comes in out of nowhere, saves them, and attacks the witch. And this also, I guess, to some degree, is similar to how it was in the game, where in the game they would always just, one or two of them would fight a witch, and then the third one would just arrive, or if maybe it's just one character fighting a witch, being like, oh no, I can't beat this witch, and the other two would come in. So there was always a lot of like rotating around who would find a witch, and then who joins the battles later and whatever. And it's a little bit like this here as well. So after Sayaka joins, she gets a Sakuga scene, because sure, why not? I like that. Then Sayaka almost gets beaten up, but also similar to how it happened in the anime. In the game, Homura comes in, she saves Sayaka by stopping time. That's important. And another callback, but not to the game, but to the original anime, Homura gives her a grief seed, but unlike in the original anime where Sayaka was all sad and was like, nah, I'm gonna die, I don't want your grief seed, she instead takes the grief seed, which is nice. And also something to note, I guess, is that in the Another Story chapters, they also very frequently gave each other grief seeds as a show of camaraderie, so it makes sense that this is also something that happens here. And at the end, they do a combination attack to take out the witch, which looks really nice. And then the three decide to go to Kamehama and save Mami. So you can kind of see they moved a bunch of content from the Another Story chapters and basically merged all of that content, like the theming as well, the sort of character development that happens with these characters, or how these characters get to the information that they need to have. They took all of that, rewrote it, merged it together, and packed it into the prologue. They merged all of that into the prologue, basically, into that Patricia fight with Homura sees Ue, and then moved all of that later into main story. After well, after the last episode chronologically. They moved all of that to that point. And does it work? Yes, it works way better than having it's like 8 full chapters of another story in the game, which is like if you let it run straight on auto, that's the end section. It's just text. If you let it run on auto read, it takes like 3 hours maybe to get through all of another story, and the prologue itself is maybe like 5 to 10 minutes. If they took all of that and basically condensed the important parts of that, when I say important parts, is basically what it means to the character, because this is something that you should probably mention, is that another story by itself, the only thing that really matters in another story is what it actually means for the characters, because the story itself doesn't get continued in any way in another story. That's all main story. Main story is the thing that drives the main plot forward. Another story is just an addendum on like, here's what the other character did while that happened. So the only thing that was important from another story is what it meant for the characters, and that was spread out over like 3 hours of basically nothing else. So it's really nice that they basically took all of that, stomped it together, pressed it onto the prologue, and now the really important stuff, what it means for Madoka, Homura, and Sayaka, that all this stuff happened in Kamihama, is now condensed onto like a 20-minute episode, actually less than that, like 18-minute episode, because there's like credits and after credit scenes after that. So yeah, I do really much like that. However, that's not quite where the episode ends. So after this, we then get this nice little scene of Yachio choking Shigure, and that is her name. That we do know this black feather, that is Shigure Miyabi. Shigure is this very shy computer nerd who has trouble talking to people, trouble socializing, basically the general computer nerd, basically, who feels more at home being at home at her PC. She like programs robots or whatever, and she's like, oh man, I like this little robot so much more than actual people, because actual people are shit and I don't know how to talk to people, except her best friend, who is Hagu Mu. But maybe we see Hagu Mu later, who knows, maybe Hagu Mu is also gonna get choked at some point. The thing about Shigure is that she's kind of a loser, and because she doesn't know how to talk to people well, she's also a little bit of an asshole sometimes. Or let's just say she's not the nicest person. She's not really an asshole, but yeah, she's not the nicest person as well. And I at some point I'm like, it's really nice to have these characters, but I also think that it's kind of deliberate to have a character like Shigure here, because Shigure is very much known for being an absolute loser, right? This is not just a random inclusion of any character at this point. It kind of makes sense that we have someone like Shigure here who is known for being an absolute loser, but also someone who in main story, like arc 2, way later, it's not gonna be in the anime, but like way after the anime is gonna end, Shigure comes into the story and she doesn't like the main characters. She doesn't like Yachio, Iroha, and the rest of them. And like this right here, this choking doesn't happen in the game, but if it did, it would make more sense why Shigure hates the main characters so much. So yeah, actually, if they ever did an Arc 2 anime, which they never would, because Arc 2 is like 3 times as long as Arc 1, which is what we're getting in this anime adaptation. So they would have like 3 times as much episodes, but if they did, they would at least already have set up Shigure and why she doesn't like the characters that much. Also, something to note is there's a missing person poster behind Shigure, and there's a missing person poster for Tsuruno, because in the game story, and I guess in the anime story as well, of course Tsuruno is missing alongside Felicia and Sana, but Felicia and Sana, they both have no parents left, so no one would put a missing poster out for them. Also, Sana is invisible, so you wouldn't be able to do that anyway. But yeah, there's a missing poster for Tsuruno, and in the game they actually meet up, like Iroha and Yachio, because once again, Iroha is there in the game. They go and meet up with Tsuruno's father, who is really, really sad and doesn't know where Tsuruno is, and it's really, really sad, and it's just like a minute-long sequence of him just being sad, and it's so heartbreaking, man. But I assume something similar might have happened in the anime, like off-screen, where Yachio was talking to Tsuruno's dad, and everyone was really sad. However, after that, we then see that Shigure is kind of breaking under the pressure and does reveal where Magia's HQ is, and that it moves. Now, here's the thing. I'm not quite sure if this is how it is in the game. I would have to look through like the entirety of main story and check every single thing that has been said about Magia's HQ from like the Hotel Fainthope, from all these different chapters. I don't think it moves in the game, but it is hidden behind a rumor. That is definitely a thing. It is hidden behind a rumor, and you can't just enter it. You would have to know about the rumor that hides it. But I'm not quite sure if it actually like moves, because I think it actually doesn't move in the game. It doesn't really matter though. The important part is you need to know about the rumor to be able to find and enter Hotel Fainthope. So Shigure is right about that. I assume the reason why they made it so it moves is so that Shugure couldn't just tell them everything on the spot. Because here's another thing that happens, and I'm not gonna like give you guys the game story right now. I'm just gonna mention it because this is gonna happen in the next episode, right? Next episode I'm gonna get that. But what happened at the similar point in the game story is that Yachi and Iroha, they go around, they try to interrogate Black Feathers, but they're really bad at it. They just like hit them, like they hit the Black Feather and then go like, tell us where the Magia's HQ is, and then the Black Feather just says no and walks away. And they go, damn, that didn't work. I did everything I could. So yeah, they're not really trying that well in the game. But here in the anime, Yachio really fucking hates the Black Feathers at this point, so it wouldn't make she's being a lot more persuasive, trying to get this information, so it would make sense in the anime that she would have gotten this information if it was there, while in the game the Black Feathers just don't want to tell them. Anyway, all of that aside, then we get a short little scene that I don't really need to talk much about. It's just Kodoe arriving at Nemu's room, and Nemu is like, I want to talk to you about Iroha, and that's where this whole thing ends. There's not really anything to talk about here, because this is just looks like a teaser for the next episode. So we're going to talk about it in the next episode. But yeah, that was 26 minutes. I don't know how long my reviews for this usually was, but they're usually like 40 minutes. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed that. Hit the subscribe button, ring the bell, and I'll see you guys next time.